Hi, everybody. Welcome to the podcast, It May Interest You to Know. I'm Toni Ann Marcolini, and I have with me today Caroline Cleveland, an author. We're going to get into her new book, When Cicadas Cry. So welcome, Caroline.
Hi, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
I read your book. Stunning. Absolutely stunning.
Well, that just makes me feel so good. Thank you.
Very, you know, uh, To Kill a Mockingbird vibe for me. And I felt it like leap off the page two, right? I'm in and I'm like, okay, I know the vibe right away and I'm there. Um, Before I get into too much more of the book, I mean, you're obviously an attorney,
I am,
right?
but I am not a criminal attorney, so I had to do a lot of learning for this.
Did you? Right, because the law really, the fact that you are a lawyer, really, I thought bled through. I felt like I was talking to a colleague, joining in when I was reading, as I thought, well, we definitely have that in common. We were talking about that before we started recording, that we're both lawyers. Um, and I thought that really came through on the page. Um, but I mean, this isn't just a legal thriller, which there certainly is that. There's a lot to this book. And there's so many layers, I think, and so much going on in this book at the same time. I really couldn't put it down. I mean, I thought it was so well written, and I thought just you had the themes there. You combined, you did my favorite thing, right? I say on the podcast a lot, I'm sort of a literary fiction snob, right? That's like my favorite. That's my genre. That's what I read most. But then I'll get a good mystery, just that's more like my guilty pleasure, when I get a good mystery or a
I won't
funny
tell.
mystery or fun. And so I felt like you combined those for me, and that's my ultimate favorite, right? This has got literary fiction vibes all over it. It's good and messy and just got a lot going on with their lives. And then you have these dual mysteries unfolding, which I just loved. So yeah, home run all around for me.
Oh,
I get
wow.
that
Thank you.
right from the start. So I have
Well,
to, I'm sorry, go ahead.
you mentioned To Kill a Mockingbird, and the current murder in this story does have that vibe. But that story's been written so very well by John Grisham and Harper Lee. That was part of I think the cold case is a little bit of my contribution to make that different. I didn't want to try to redo something that they had done so well. I wanted to do something a little bit different.
It's definitely different. It's got the vibe though, right?
Oh
It's
yeah.
got the vibe. You feel the vibe. When you're in, like, you're in the room, you got the vibe, you're feeling it. It's definitely got the vibe. And I say that really as an applause. Because I mean, To Kill a Mockingbird, you're talking, Pulitzer Prize winning novel. I thought you captured that. That's what I'm saying. You're in the room, you're in the
Oh,
discussion, right?
great. Thank you. Thank you.
Um,
Um, go ahead.
I was gonna say, what was your creative process or your creative, how did, I mean, is this something that I've talked to all different lawyers, they get their creative process down, to create all different ways, right? Some people are like, oh, I have my routine. I can only write behind the screen. Some people are like, no, I do my best writing when I'm, jogging. I'm in the shower and I get my ideas that way. Some people work off an outline. Some people don't. What was your creative process for this?
Every book, and this is the first book I've published, but not the first book I've written, and so they're all different. This one, some just jump into my head and bang on there until I let them out. This one was not like that. This idea was in my head for at least 10 years. The idea of a young lawyer taking on a case with zero clue in the world to him or anybody else that it was connected to another one, to one that was as old as he was, because you really are alone in the dark in a cave feeling around and hoping what you find is a light and not a bat. So that idea was in my head for a long time, and I just started adding and little pieces, and oh well, maybe it could be this, and maybe it could work like that, and I always knew that I wanted a dual protagonist. Um, this not to make stereotypes, but I find when I'm talking with my husband or other male friends, women seem to be more willing to step into the skin and of a male protagonist than sometimes the other way around. Not sure why, but I find that books with dual protagonists have something for everybody. My husband's much quicker to accept that one from me. Say, oh yeah, yeah, you're right. This is a good book. So I knew I wanted his partner, whether it be a love partner or a business partner, to be part of it, so that everybody had somebody to root for. And then somewhere in 2016, 2017, as I'm writing this book, we had two just horrific incidents here locally. One was the Mother Manual AME Church massacre. A young man named Dylan Rue from the Upcountry massacred 9 Black parishioners during a Bible study. Just horrific. And there just aren't words to say what that did to our community. 20 to 30,000 people joined hands across the Cooper River Bridge, which is like a couple miles long. So I mean, it was big. And about the same time, we had a police shooting of an unarmed Black suspect. Walter Scott was the victim. And again, it just got bigger and bigger. And the two cases came to trial the same week in December of 2016. Our federal courthouse is right across the street from our state courthouse. The church massacre was tried as a hate crime, a federal hate crime, and the police shooting was tried as a murder in state court. So, I mean, it was, as I'm doing this and I'm still working on my little story, it dawns on me there is no way in the world that my characters are sitting in this place at this time and not being affected the same way the rest of us were by what was going on. So slowly, race had always been a little bit of an issue and social injustice, but it became a bigger issue. And I think that's where the part of the book came in that you like so much, where we're dealing with important matters, little social injustice, personal accountability, and loving who you choose. It's just, it was a whole different, like you said, a whole different level of book once that. And I didn't ever plan to do that. My characters just decided they had something more thought provoking to say, and I just rolled with it.
I love that. I love the authors who tell me, you know what? These characters told me, right? They told me, they were in my head and they just told me what they wanted to do. And I love that. Really, it certainly makes you feel, because we get attached to characters, right? I'm a big
Oh,
reader, I
yeah.
read a lot, and you read a book and like I love Daddy, right? I mean, that I thought she was, and going to what you said earlier, there's something for everybody. I really love Daddy, and
For
I was
me, it was
hoping they'd read
Eli.
more of Addie, hint, hint.
That I got a plan for that.
Good. Good. I mean, I really took to her, and don't misunderstand me, I liked Zach too. I thought they played off each other well. For those, obviously who haven't read the book yet, because it's just being released now. Zach is a lawyer, kind of down on his luck, sees this case that falls in his lap really, as his redemption, almost his way to kind of bounce back, and rebuild a career. That you know what, I'm not sure he was all that sure he wanted back again. I mean, he's so conflicted, I think. And then
Zach
his
and
yeah.
Addie are opposites.
Yeah, they're
Um,
opposites. Like Addie is very on top of her game. She's aggressive. She knows what she wants. Lucky for Zach, she appears to want him. And she's a private investigator, and they wind up working together to the extent they're romantically interlocked, but and they wind up working together on what are companion cases. Right? There's this present day murder trial going on. Um, that Zach has the client, and there's a cold case, that weaves in. And you made another choice that I thought was interesting, and I have to ask you, did you ever read Agatha Christie's The Murder of Roger Ackroyd?
I don't think I read that one. I read a lot of hers, but I don't think I read that one.
I ask because a choice you made. I mean, we get multiple narrators throughout the book, right? And one of them is the murderer. Right? I
Yeah.
mean, I hate to say I'm not spoiling anything. I'm not telling
No,
you.
no, no, because it's page one or page two where you first get to talk to the murderer, so that you're not spoiling anything. And the cover itself tells you that the murderer is watching. But that came to me from a character too. As I'm sitting there trying to figure out, I've got this old case. It is as old as the people who are investigating it, and older than one of them. I think, how am I going to make that lively and real and vibrant? And I mean, first thought was, I can look at police files with blah blah blah, old moldy box. That's just it doesn't grab your heart. So then I thought, okay, well then I've got some witnesses that are still alive. Well, yeah, but they didn't see anything, so that still doesn't get me there. And I'm listening to the killer and whisper in my ear about why it happened and how it happened. And I'm thinking, well, why don't you drag your butt over here and do it in the book? And it's like, oh, that is exactly how we do this. I'm going to let my killer talk to my reader in these cryptic sidebars that the other characters can't hear. And then the reader gets to help figure it out, which is what I always love to do when I'm playing the reader. So that I'm just like, dang, killer, you are a genius. Get over here and do this for the readers.
Sure, and it's got I mean, it reminded me a little bit. Agatha Christie's got this book where actually the whole book is written, and you find out in the end the whole book was written, the narrator
Oh,
was the killer.
wow.
Which I for some reason it kind of reminded me of that because it's not exactly, but I mean, I wondered if you were influenced at all by that.
No, there were some other authors though that I had read that had done somewhat similar things. John Hart did a book called Redemption Road, and the killer had some first person chapters and also a third person appearance in the book. Although that one was kind of backwards in of what I did in his book, the killer had a much the killer first person was a much more prevalent part of the book, and the killer third person was a shadow
Yeah.
character, where this was more the opposite.
Well, I liked the point of view of the killer just to the extent, and then I hope this isn't offensive, but it gives a little bit of an eerie vibe then to it, right?
I
Like
wanted that.
it definitely gives a more eerie feeling. I mean, because you're you're when you're with Zach and Addie, it's intelligent writing. It's, it's they're unraveling their lives. They're unraveling these mysteries that, they seem a little bit lost on early on, and as things start to come together. But when the killer pops in, I feel it changes everything. Like it suddenly feels eerie. You feel like that I'm being watched. It gives that element to it too, which again is uncommon in mysteries. It really is. I mean, I don't think I'm overstating that. I read a lot, and most of the mysteries are either police procedurals, or sometimes it's a private detective. Just kind of having fun. That more Janet Ivanovich, Stephanie Plum vibe. But you don't get to see very much of this literary fiction meets mystery meets courtroom drama meets this just eerie thing you got going on there, right? Because that suddenly hypes it up to a little scarier thing. It's that chill you get when you're like, oh, like I'm in the mind of the killer, and I thought that was very unique as well. This is that's why I say this is a stunning novel. There is so much going on here, and for whatever you like, you can kind of find it here. You're like, "Oh, I'm a mystery person, but I really like that, that sinister," you get that with the point of view of the killer.
It makes it human. It's not just some anonymous monster that nobody believes is real. It's a person. This is a person with a life, with feelings, that's had whatever happened to this person to make this person what it is now. I think that's what makes it scarier to me. We think of um, killers as being this other animal that we'd instantly recognize if we saw on the street, but no, killers are people that we see every day, perhaps. So not scary to me.
Sure, right? They say, was it Jerry Seinfeld used to do that work that used to do that joke thing, right? That this sometimes the safest place to live is next door to the serial killer, right? Because they're always the ones
Because he's a
saying, "Hey,
nice
he's a
guy,
nice
quiet
guy. He said
neighbor.
hello." Yeah. They always tell the best stories and suddenly you find out what else they're doing. But sure, this killer, I really loved that line that kinda I'm gonna blow it, I know, I should have written it down, but
No.
he more or less says something along the lines of, "That's the thing with a secret that's like, that's this old, it
You're not
really
keeping
it
it
keeps you.
anymore. It's keeping you. Yeah.
It's keeping you," and when I read that, I was like, "Oh, yeah," right? I mean, because that's
That's
got a
true, though.
truth. That's got a universal truth to it.
That
Doesn't it? I
does.
mean, never mind a murderer, almost in anybody's life, if you keep a secret long enough, right, it does get to the point where you seem to feel like everything you do revolves around keeping that secret, right? It does start to keep you as opposed to the other way around. I thought, well, that's got a universal truth to it outside of, what he's using it for. But really, it really resonated for me.
Glad. Well, the books that I've read in my life that I didn't really finish when I put down that stayed with me, that I thought about at night or when I was doing something later, were the ones that had something to do with love. It might not be romantic love, it might be familial love, or it might be the loss of love or the searching. But this book has a lot of heart in it. I mean, it is a murder mystery. There's plenty of dead bodies to trip over. So don't anybody who loves mysteries get scared that there's not some gore here for you. But it does have a lot of heart. The characters were, my husband called them my imaginary friends because they were, especially Eli. I just loved Eli. If I were going to spend the day with somebody, I would want to spend the day with Colleton Burns. He plays by his own rules. He does what he wants to do, and he likes to drink a bit. So I think he would be a lot of fun to spend an afternoon with. I don't think I'd want much more of him, but I think an afternoon would be great. And you're right, Addie. Addie was raised in a big family, siblings, pets, mother and dad. They always told her, she had lots of love. They told her, "You are enough. You are worthy." And so that's her truth. She's not one bit to throw herself afraid to throw herself out to the world because she feels like she is enough. She believes that. Zach is the opposite end of the spectrum. Zach had a tragic childhood, a father who walked out on his mother before Zach even knew him, a mother who died young, put himself through law school, and then stepped in that big old pile of mess and almost lost the law career he had. So he's not sure-footed at all, and he knows he needs to get back, but he's so scared. And that's when Addie tells him, "Look, saving this young man might be the only way to save yourself." And to me, that's a big piece of what the book is about: redeeming yourself and by helping somebody else.
And you know what? I felt though right away, Zach wanted it, didn't he? I mean, for
He
me,
did.
right away in the opening pages, he gets this call from Sam's father, and I
Grandfather.
felt it almost immediately like i- anybody else would be more aggravated, right? I mean, you by the
It's
call,
4 o'clock in the morning. What do you want?
yeah, like would be aggravated by that, but he seems to want, he was drawn to it almost immediately in a way like, oh, like, you've piqued his curiosity right away. He wants to get in the mix of it. As much as he's a reluctant participant, I felt at some points, he wants to be in it.
And he wants that father figure. He doesn't seem to be as aware as we are that he immediately bonds to older men. I mean, he does that he's looking for something that he's not self-aware enough to know he's looking for, and we see it all through the book.
Yeah. Yeah. So now, do you have a favorite part of this book for you? Like, was there a point where you were like, yeah, like your fingers are going a mile a minute on the keyboard, you're like, this is the part that I was the most connected to.
The killer chapters were probably easier to get. Which I had another interviewer ask me, should we be scared of you since you were so comfortable being the killer. And I said, probably. But the killer chapters they were so much more fun for me because my killer was being totally anonymous and so could be unafraid to say, you know, whatever. And you're when you're writing, you're always afraid to let your heroes get too messy. You might need them in a sequel, you know. But when you've got the killer, you can just go wild. So that was a lot of fun. And anytime Eli opened his mouth, I just love Eli's character. I respect what he's been through. I you know, and I really respect that he was willing to have the conversation. You know, about how it went. I'm sure I'll get some um, not so great comments about that, but I tried to keep respect as my North Star. I don't understand what it's like to be a 70-year-old Black man because I'm not one, but I tried to be respectful in everything. And I think that I managed to do that. I also tried to keep my opinion out of this book as what was happening here after the Mother Emanuel massacre and the Walter Scott shooting. We had people on every corner with bullhorns shouting their opinions, whether it's about the flag, whether it's about the shooting, whether it's about whatever. There were slogans on demonstrator boards, there were slogans on T-shirts, there were well-written editorials, there were whispered comments over cocktails. And I tried to channel that. And instead of just putting my opinion in this book, there's a wide variety of opinions expressed in this book. And I tried to channel what I'd heard in the community and let my pages be a platform for all of those voices. So I hope everybody can see something that they align with or they at least understand.
Tell me how the law influenced you, your legal background.
Well, I do work with police um, agencies, so you know, and I hear a lot about crime and how it's cases are handled and that, but I really didn't know anything at all about criminal law, and I'm just so very fortunate in my practice. You know, governmental agencies and need have employment problems too, so. Our public defender actually was my client, and I work with a lot of governmental agencies. And I also where the solicitor's office was my client. So I had a lot of friends who were from both sides who had prosecuted and who had defended big crimes. And in fact, the public defender had the job of defending the murderer at the Mother Emanuel Church. So, I mean, these were people who were close to that. And they were able to sit down and read my book with me and say, this would never happen this way. Or, yeah, you're pretty close here, but move it over here. Or, no, these people wouldn't be at that hearing, or this hearing wouldn't be that long. And there were a couple of places where I've been had some unusual, you got to make the story work, but they were both so helpful to me. And I also had a friend who was in law enforcement who was very helpful with, you know, how procedurally some things would work and where they would keep evidence and how often he'd be able to see his client in jail and where they'd keep the prisoner and whether they send him to a prison or keep him local, just things like that I didn't know. But I found it so interesting that in criminal law, there are no depositions. I mean, we are in civil law. I can find out anything I want to know about you if you're stupid enough to sue my client. I mean, think about it. You've got subpoena power. You get whatever you want almost with some limitation. In a case where a man's life is at stake, or perhaps the safety of the public, nobody gets anything at all unless the defendant says, hey, I want discovery. And in that case, it starts as reciprocal, but it's just bizarre to me. And I do understand that's the constitutional thing of not having to incriminate yourself, but these guys are the criminal lawyers, they work in the wild, wild west, and my hat is off to them.
Well, I mean, trial wise, I mean, I think your trial experience, shine through, definitely in the courtroom part. Was it nice to marry those two things about yourself, right? It's not when you're interested in two different things, like the law, obviously, and you clearly have a passion for writing. Uh, that how was it marrying those two things?
It was good, and it helped my life stay not so fragmented, I guess. Kind of at least for the first shot, trying to get it all done. It's tough when you're practicing full time to find a lot of time for anything else. They tell us on the first day of law school, I'm sure they told you too, that the law is a jealous mistress, and there's a reason they tell you that, because it is true. It's hard to find time for other things. So the fact that I could marry them, as you put it, was helpful to me.
Sure, and I mean, and anybody with I think there's a difference sometimes, right, between practicing law and your appreciation for the law, right? So that you can, in the purest sense or in the purest form of how the law is supposed to be. I think there's something in in every lawyer's mind, right, that loves that, right, that loves the pure form of law that they learned in law school. But then there's the practicing, right? And practicing
Messier.
doesn't always come close to what the purest sense of the law is. And then you have to try to live both those truths when you're a practicing lawyer, right? Both the truth that it's not exactly perfect or how it should be, but I have to make the best of where I am in the trenches. And I thought that you brought some of that there too, right? The imperfection that there is to the system combined with, you know, the ideal way a lawyer tries to look at things.
Well, and I think that's why I've been so drawn to public sector work. Obviously, I'm on the defense side, but there are a lot of constitutional issues, and a public employer just simply cannot do a lot of things that a private employer can do. And constitutional law is so academic and well developed, and I love that part of it.
Me
That is
too.
a little bit more like what we got to do in law school,
Yeah,
or what we thought we'd do in law school.
agreed. Now you plan on doing a sequel, I hope. Uh,
I'm toying with the idea. I have to hope that this book will do well enough so that I'll get invited to play again. But if I do, I've heard a lot of people say they'd like to hear more about Zach and Addie, and I think that might be something I'd be interested in too.
oh, I would absolutely love these are great characters. I mean, I think I can't see the book. This has everything. I mean, I, this is going to be an award-winning book. This is not just
Well, I hope you're
an
right.
average book. So I think, once it's really, I think it's being released right about now. Uh,
And we are 2 weeks past, so we've done pretty well. These, you don't have any real numbers. I can only judge by what happens locally. I've had a nice practicing here for 30 years has given me a nice network, and they have been so generous and wonderful. We had our launch party Monday night, May 6th. We had 150 people show up for a debut launch party. So I was very excited. I didn't sleep much that night.
did you always want to write?
I had a 12th grade English teacher, and I hear all the time that most writers have somebody, and her name was Virginia Von Lee. She taught high school in a small rural county high school where I went to high school. And I was not the kid who really loved school. I will simply put it that way and be kind to myself. But she believed in me long before I had the courage to do that. And I had a friend named Paula, and Paula was very good at math, but Paula hated writing and reading and English and all that stuff. So I cut a deal with Paula one day. She had to write some kind of, I can't remember if it was a short story or a poem. She had to write something for Virginia's class. And I had to do some algebra, and I would just have rather lay down in front of a train than do the algebra. It was just it made no sense to me. So I said, tell you what, you do my algebra, I'll write you a short story and you can rewrite it in your handwriting and all that jazz. So I made out like a bandit. She made 100 for me on that algebra. When she got her paper back, Virginia Von Lee had written on it, Paula, this is absolutely delightful. Please give it back to Caroline. So, yeah, yeah, that put a little seed in my head that maybe I had something, a little bit of talent for writing. And my mother, who's no longer with us, she was the personification of unconditional love, and she always believed I had something to say worth listening to.
Were you writing short stories and things like that? Like when you were, in high school, did you keep writing? And like, is this
Oh yeah,
something that
she
you just
kept
put on the shelf?
one that Yeah, she kept one that I'd written. Basically, somebody broke in the house and killed everybody but me. She thought it was hilarious. She said, "You must have been really mad at me that day." It was about the third grade. and then, um, and then I tried my hand at it uh, in right after college. I, the problem was I didn't have the life experience.
Yeah.
I grew up in a small rural southern town. We had two television stations if we had enough tinfoil on the rabbit ears, and a handful of radio stations. I loved books, but that was somebody else's experience. So I really didn't have, and it was only after 30 years or at least 20 when I got serious about it, of practicing law, where I had seen firsthand how the world works and how many deals get made in back rooms, and what other unholy things happen that maybe we'd like to pretend don't. And that's and I got to see it through other people's eyes as well. Most of my clients have been my clients for decades, so they've influenced me and taught me more about how the world works. And I think maybe that's why that it's coming to fruition now. I finally have more of the pieces. My characters are real because I know what real people are like now. Have not been in my 70s yet, but I've done everything else, and all my other characters. The people in this book are a wide variety of ages. The young accused of killing, the young man accused of killing in the current murder, he's in his 20s, and so was the murder victim. Addie and Zach are in their 30s. The witnesses who were around the night of the old case are now in their 50s. Emma and Colleton are in their 60s, and Eli's in his 70s. That's a lot of people, and it was really interesting writing it, looking at the difference in how they communicated to each other. Colleton and Eli are close in age, and they communicate one way. And then when you get them in the jail, and Colleton's trying to communicate with Sam, and he's asking him questions about, what's on your email, and Sam's looking at him and go, "We don't. People my age use Snapchat. We don't do email." So you trying to build all those little bridges and see how they would be traveled differently was interesting for me.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. I mean, there is yeah, I didn't really think about that too much, but there is a variety of ages. Um, but I love what you were saying about needing the years behind you to write, because I do think that's an essential component. Right? To the best writers, they've lived. Right? And
Yeah,
it comes through, because there's no substitute for that, right? There's things I've seen in my practicing. I practiced law 30 years. There's things I've seen that you wouldn't even believe, right? I couldn't make up. Like like you couldn't make this up. Like no fiction I could create would be as wild as the things I've seen.
yeah.
And
And
I
you wake
think
up every morning thinking you've seen it all, and then you go to work.
exactly. Right. So there really isn't a substitute for that. So when you then start to, I think, try to create a fiction, boy, you have this palette, right, of colors to pick from, because you've seen all different people and how different people react. How good people sometimes do bad things, and how bad people sometimes do good things.
There's
Uh,
some of both in all of us, and you got to count that in.
And when the more you live and survive, right? And I say that, I choose that word carefully because there is that, right? There's surviving, those of us who are here now, survived the pandemic, right? There's another thing behind us that we lived through and came to tell the tale. And there's something to that. There's something to that life experience that as you keep moving through, um, lets you be able to give really good advice to young people, right? And I
Who will not take it just like you and I did not take it. You
exactly,
you have to learn the hard way.
exactly. So I think there's something to that too, in that the best stuff that's written has that understanding of the human component. And I thought you definitely brought that to it. So there's a big applause there. So tell me what's next on your agenda.
Well, like I said, I'm toying with a sequel, and I'm also kind of playing around with a psychological thriller. Um, So it will depend on what the publisher wants. They are, it's a business for them. And I have to say, I have to do a big shout out for Union Square. They're a small publisher, but they've been so very, very supportive of me, and that they have treated me like I was not some nobody that nobody knew yet all along the way. And I have the most fabulous editor in the world. Her name is Claire Wachtel. And I am just convinced she has an internal divining rod that finds problems in novels. And she didn't make any big changes in this one. One or two little things. She thought I had revealed my killer a little bit too earlier. And she said, I think you should move it back to the chapter where XYZ happens. I said, that's a great idea. How do I do that? And she was like, well, that's your problem. You're the writer. But other than, I mean, she's just been fabulous to work for, very supportive, and the whole team there has. And the cover, can I show it off? The cover of this book
Absolutely.
is absolutely gorgeous. This was not the first cover we came up with. The other one, it was beautiful, just didn't capture the story. And this one, they really, there's at least two or three, this one scene does not exist anywhere. There's at least two or three locales they've spliced together to make it actually be everything in our book. They've got the iconic live oak, they've got the Spanish moss, and there are three monuments, which is so fits right in with our story. And
Hey,
the title as well.
I have to ask this one question though, because it really kind of sits in the back of my head. Did you know who the killer was going to be when you started writing?
Yes and no. I knew that I knew who the killer was, but there were things about the killer that came to me as I tried to write the killer. I said, wait a minute, I have this. I knew who it was. I just had things about this person not figured out yet. Um, so
Yeah.
that as the killer talked to me and I listened, I thought I've misjudged this person. This person's a little bit different than I thought this person was. But I knew what role the killer had in life, if that answers your question without
Yeah.
giving up anything to anybody else.
I ask that because I'm always curious when I interview mystery writers because some will tell me no. I wasn't sure between a few characters who I was going to make it when I started writing. So I'm always fascinated by that. Like, I would think you have to have it kind of in your head in
In your
advance,
head,
as
yeah.
to set up from day one. But some people have told me no, and I find that interesting.
Actually had to go back and make it more plausible that it could have been anybody because I was so sure who it was. So, and then I had to go back and make sure that the reader could find a reason to make it everybody. So that to just, because nobody likes to read a book that's a given. You want to be able to figure something out.
Sure. Trips to the library on this? Any
Uh,
trips to the library to do research? I'm always curious about that too.
so much can be researched online now. Plus, my biggest research was trying to figure out how the law worked, criminal law. And like I said, I had these three friends who just gave up their time. One of them was texting and emailing me during the Super Bowl. I mean, he's flipping through my manuscripts and saying, no, 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 don't do this, do this. And this doesn't look real. This doesn't. He said, you have the wrong people at this hearing, and blah blah blah. So that's pretty devoted friend who will text you and email you during the Super Bowl. But that was, and Walterboro, I didn't have to do any research. I grew up there. And I needed that for two reasons. One, I know what it looks like right now. It's just 45 miles yonder way, but I needed to know what it looked like in 1983. And I had graduated college then, but in the late 70s, I was right there on that beach with those kids doing all those things those kids were doing. So I didn't have to do any research. I didn't put any real names in there, but I was in those same places having fun just like they were. So that was the easy part for me.
I always like to give a shout out to the libraries, right? Because I think that they provide an invaluable service to the
Yes, they
community.
do.
Not only the fact that somebody can go read, even if who doesn't have the money, maybe to buy a book, but you can get almost anything there nowadays. And community passes to museums and certain cultural things. But you can also I've talked to a lot of writers who tell me yeah, you know what? I went there because I needed to research this historical event or, something that I was trying to make true in my book. And and it really isn't a better place than the library to find anything you want, whether it be photographs of a point in time, a place in time, or so I always try to give a shout out. If any author used the library, we like to give them credit.
Actually, you reminded me when you said that. Yes, we checked out 3 books about Edisto. I grew up playing on Edisto, but since I didn't live there, I didn't know the older history, and it was kind of interesting to read that. So yeah, I guess I had forgotten about that. We did go and check out some books on Edisto Island.
So we give it three cheers to the library again.
You got it. That's right.
Well, Caroline, I mean, your book, I'm expecting awards and accolades coming your way. Again, it's a stunning debut novel. You really hit a home run. You set the bar very high for yourself moving forward, I think.
Well, good.
But
I
you've
hope the rest
created
of the world agrees with you.
I'm confident in my opinion, I'm confident. Yeah, this is gonna accolades are coming your way. It's a stunning debut. I recommend anyone who hasn't read it to please run out and get it. It's you're not gonna be disappointed. Whatever you like, you're gonna find it here. And this is just a really well told story. When you talk about storytelling in books, that's why we all do it, right? We're all that little child who likes to be read a story before bedtime, right? We kind of keep that for my storytellers out there. This is just a great story, well told, very real in its feel. It'll make you think, it'll make you cry, it'll make you laugh. Yeah, I think you hit all the bells. So I can't recommend it enough.
Thank you.
And I hope you'll come back and keep talking to me as you continue to write.
I would like nothing better.
So I'm going to close the podcast there. Run out and get the book. There'll be a link up under the video. Also, we'll put it up under the audio. And see you next time.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.